He's just an old man, Sarah. What's he going to do? The money is better off with us. Think of it as an early inheritance. The voice was a low whisper, thick with a smug confidence that slithered through the floorboards and into the darkness of my bedroom. It was the voice of my son-in-law, Mark, a man I had welcomed into my family, a man I had treated as my own. He had no idea what this old man was about to do. He had mistaken my patience for frailty, my silence for senility. He was about to learn, in the most permanent way imaginable, that the deepest waters are often the most still and the most dangerous. I lay perfectly still in my bed, the thin blanket pulled up to my chin. My breathing was even and slow, the practiced rhythm of a man deep in slumber. But behind my closed eyelids, my mind was a maelstrom. Every word they spoke in the living room was a shard of glass twisting in my heart. The betrayal wasn't a sudden stab. It was a slow, creeping poison I had been unknowingly ingesting for months. Tonight was simply the moment the venom finally reached my soul. "But Mark, it's his money," my daughter Sarah whispered back. Her voice was thin, a frayed thread of conscience already snapping under the pressure of her husband's greed. He worked his whole life for it. For Mom. For me, there it was. The ghost of a protest, the last flicker of the daughter I had raised. But it was weak, easily extinguished. "And now he's going to work it for us," Mark countered, his tone dismissive. "Look, he's not all there anymore. He barely knows what day it is. Last week he asked me if I'd seen his dog, Sparky. Sarah, Sparky died 15 years ago. The man is living in the past. Keeping all that cash locked up in that ridiculous safe is irresponsible. It's a fire hazard. We'd be doing him a favor, managing it for him." His voice dripped with a condescending pity that was more insulting than pure malice. He painted me as a doddering fool, a relic to be managed, a treasure chest to be cracked open. And my daughter, my Sarah, the little girl whose scraped knees I had bandaged and whose nightmares I chased away, was silent. Her silence was her consent. It was the final, devastating blow. The pain was physical. A cold, heavy stone settled in my chest, where just hours before there had been a father's love. I thought back to all the times I had feigned confusion, all the moments I had played the part of the forgetful old man. It had started as a game, a way to get a moment's peace when their endless chatter about finances and investments became too much. They'd ask me a complex question about my old business, and I'd just smile vaguely and say, "Oh, that was all so long ago." I saw the look that passed between them, a mixture of pity and opportunity. So I leaned into it. When they moved me in with them after my fall, they spoke of concern, of wanting to care for me. I see now they were just dragons moving closer to the horde. They saw a weak, grieving widower, frail and alone. They never once considered that the man who built a multi-million-dollar logistics company from the back of a single pickup truck might still have all his faculties. They saw the sheep's clothing and never for a second suspected the wolf beneath. Tonight, that wolf was wide awake. The hurt was still there, a raw, gaping wound. But something else was growing alongside it, something cold and sharp and precise. It was resolve. It was the quiet, calculating hum of the mind that had once navigated complex shipping routes and outmaneuvered corporate giants. Mark thought he was dealing with a faded photograph of a man. He was about to meet the original, in full, vivid color. Lying there in the dark, I didn't weep. The time for tears was over. The time for planning had begun. My life's work was not going to be siphoned off by a cheap grifter and his spineless accomplice, even if that accomplice was my own flesh and blood. My late wife, Helen, had made me promise. On her deathbed, her hand frail in mine, she'd whispered, "Protect our girl, James, and protect what we built." It's her future. I had failed on the first count. I would not fail on the second. Protecting what we built now meant protecting it from our daughter. The irony was as bitter as bile. I remembered Helen so vividly it was as if she were in the room with me, her presence a warm counterpoint to the coldness seeping from the living room. We met when we were barely 20, both of us with more dreams than dollars. I was driving a beat-up truck for a local delivery service, and she was a waitress at a diner on my route. I used to save my last delivery of the day for her stop, just so I could see her smile. Her smile could have powered a city. We saved every penny. We ate canned soup and day-old bread. We bought our first brand-new truck together, a gleaming red Ford. Helen named it the Cardinal. She painted the name herself on the driver's side door in elegant white script. That truck was our beginning. I drove, and she handled the books, the calls, the scheduling, all from a tiny desk crammed into the corner of our one-bedroom apartment. She was the brains and the heart. I was the muscle and the wheels. People underestimated us. They saw a young kid with a single truck and a pretty wife answering the phone. They didn't see the relentless ambition, the perfectly balanced ledgers, the routes I had memorized that cut delivery times by 20%. We grew. One truck became three. Three became a fleet. Our tiny apartment became a small house, the one Sarah grew up in. The one where, years later, I held Helen's hand as she passed away in our bedroom. Every floorboard of that house, every dollar in my bank account, was infused with her memory, our shared sacrifice. It wasn't just money. It was the physical manifestation of our life together. And Mark, that parasitic leech, spoke of it as if it were a lottery ticket he'd found on the ground. Then came Mark. Sarah brought him home for Sunday dinner about 5 years ago. He was all teeth and charm, a firm handshake for me and a bouquet of lilies for Helen, who was still with me then. He wore a suit that was a little too shiny, a watch that was a little too big. He talked a big game, dropping names of tech startups and spewing jargon about disrupting the market and synergistic growth. I saw a man who had read all the books about being successful, but had never actually done the work. Helen was more forgiving. "He makes her happy, James," she'd said later that night as we washed the dishes. Give him a chance for Helen, for Sarah. I did. I gave him more than a chance. When I wanted to get married, I paid for the whole extravagant affair, the one Mark insisted they needed to maintain their social standing when they bought their house, this very house I was now a prisoner in. I gave them the down payment, a sum that would have been a fortune to Helen and me when we were their age. I did it because I had made a promise. Protect our girl. I thought providing for her, ensuring she never had a struggle as we had, was how I could keep that promise. I was wrong. My generosity hadn't been a safety net. It had been a gilded cage, weakening her moral fiber, making her susceptible to a predator like Mark. The worst came about a year after Helen passed. Mark's latest can't-miss venture, some cryptocurrency nonsense, imploded spectacularly. He had sunk all their savings into it, and then some. He came to me, his face a mask of panicked desperation. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a pathetic, theatrical humility. He wept. He actually wept. He swore it was a one-time mistake, that he had learned his lesson, that he just needed to get back on his feet to provide for Sarah. I looked at my daughter's worried face, her eyes pleading with me, and I wrote the check. A very, very large check. But I wasn't a complete fool. I had him sign a formal loan agreement drafted by my lawyer. I told him it was just a formality for tax purposes. In truth, it was a leash. I had a feeling I might need it one day. He signed it without a second thought. His relief, so palpable he was practically vibrating. He promised to pay back every penny. It's been 2 years. I haven't seen a dime. Now, listening from my bed, I understood. He never intended to pay it back. He saw my wealth as an infinite well from which he could draw, and now he was tired of asking. He was ready to take the well itself. The voices in the living room faded as they finally went to their own bedroom. The house fell silent, but my mind was louder than ever. The fog of grief and feigned senility had burned away, leaving behind a landscape of crystalline clarity. They thought the money was in the old safe in my study. The safe was a monstrous black cast-iron box that had belonged to my grandfather. It was more of a sentimental heirloom than a practical security device. I hadn't used it for anything important in decades. After selling my company, a quiet deal that neither Sarah nor Mark knew the full extent of, my real assets were not in cash or bonds. They were digital, managed by a discreet and ferociously loyal wealth management firm in Zurich, accessible only by a series of biometric scans and cryptographic keys that existed only in my head and in a vault in a Swiss bank. The safe in my study was a decoy, and they were about to walk right into my trap. A slow, malicious smile spread across my face in the darkness. It was a feeling I hadn't felt in years. The thrill of the game. The cold satisfaction of a perfectly laid plan. Mark wanted to play games with an old man. Fine, let's play. The next morning, I was the picture of harmless fragility. I shuffled into the kitchen, my hand trembling slightly as I reached for the coffee pot. Sarah rushed to help me, her face etched with a guilt that was almost painful to watch. "Dad, let me get that for you." "You should sit down." I gave her a weak, grateful smile. "Thank you, dear. My hands are a bit shaky today." Mark was at the table, scrolling through his phone, not even looking up. "Morning, James," he grunted, the very picture of bored indifference. I was just part of the furniture. Perfect. Phase 1 of my plan was to bait the hook. Later that day, while Sarah was out shopping, I sat in the living room, pretending to read an old photo album. I waited until I heard Mark coming down the stairs. With a theatrical little sigh, I let a piece of paper slip from between the pages of the album and flutter to the floor. It was a fake bank statement I had printed out the night before, showing an account balance with a very impressive number of zeros. I didn't notice it fall. I continued to gaze at a picture of Sarah as a little girl. Mark stopped at the bottom of the stairs. I could feel his eyes on the paper. I saw his foot nudge it slightly out of the corner of my eye. "James," he said, his voice smooth as oil. "You dropped something?" I looked up, feigning confusion. "Oh, did I?" I made a slow, pained effort to bend over. "Here, let me," he said quickly, scooping it up. He glanced at it, his eyes widening for a fraction of a second before his mask of casual indifference snapped back into place. He handed it to me. "Looks important." "Oh, this old thing," I said, waving it dismissively as I tucked it back into the album. "Just some paperwork. Can't keep track of it all these days." I saw the glint in his eye. The hook was not only baited, it was swallowed whole. Phase 2 was securing my witness and my evidence. That afternoon, I told Sarah I was going for a walk to get some fresh air. Instead, I took a taxi to the office of Arthur Evans, my lawyer and a friend of 40 years. Arthur was a sharp, no-nonsense man with eyes that missed nothing. I sat across from his mahogany desk and laid out the entire story, from my suspicions to the conversation I had overheard. I left nothing out, including my own daughter's complicity. When I finished, he was silent for a long moment, his fingertips steepled under his chin. His expression was grim. "James," he said finally, his voice low. "This is despicable, I know, Arthur," I replied, my voice steady. "But I'm not here for sympathy. I am here for assistance. I want to catch them in the act." Red-handed, I explained my plan for the decoy safe. Arthur's grim expression slowly morphed into a thin, appreciative smile. "You always were a chess player, James. A grandmaster. What do you need from me?" We spent the next hour working out the details. Arthur would arrange for the installation of several micro-cameras in my study, all feeding to a secure server we could access remotely. They would capture everything. He also made a certified copy of the loan agreement Mark had signed. The original would go into a bank vault. A simple copy would go into the safe. Phase 3 was preparing the contents of the safe. This was the part that required the most thought. It wasn't about monetary value. It was about psychological warfare. The next day, I gathered the items. First, the worthless copy of the loan agreement. Next, I found the most beautiful photograph I had of Helen. It was from our 25th anniversary. She was laughing, her head thrown back, the very picture of joy in life. I had it framed in simple, elegant silver. Underneath it, I placed a letter I'd stayed up all night writing. It wasn't angry or accusatory. It was worse. It was disappointed. "My dear Sarah," it began, "if you are reading this, it means you have made a choice. You have chosen a man's greed over a father's love, and a shortcut to wealth over a lifetime of integrity. I have loved you more than my own life since the moment you were born. Your mother and I worked our fingers to the bone, not just to give you a comfortable life, but to teach you the value of hard work, of honesty, of family. I see now that we failed. The money you are looking for is not here. It was never about the money, was it? It was about respect, which you and your husband have shown me none of. I hope whatever you gain from this is worth what you have lost. For you have lost my trust, You have lost your honor, and you have lost your father. I will always be your father, but I'm not sure I can ever again be your dad. The final item was the masterstroke. It was a single, heavy, uncirculated silver dollar from the year I was born. I polished it until it gleamed. I attached a small, simple tag to it. The tag read, "You wanted my life savings. This is all that's left for you. You earned it." I placed all the items in a velvet-lined box and put the box inside the old iron safe. I closed the heavy door, turned the combination lock, a meaningless sequence of 000, and spun the handle. The trap was set. The final phase was creating the opportunity. A few days later, at dinner, I made my announcement. I had a call from an old friend today. I said, my voice full of forced cheerfulness. Bill from my old Army unit. He's invited me down to his place in the Keys for a long weekend of fishing. I think I'll go. It's been too long. I saw the flicker of electricity pass between Mark and Sarah. It was so fast, I would have missed it if I hadn't been looking for it. "Dad, that's wonderful," Sarah said, her enthusiasm a little too bright. "You deserve a break," Mark chimed in, clapping me on the shoulder. "That's the spirit, James. Go catch the big one. Don't worry about a thing here. We'll hold down the fort." Oh, I knew they would. I knew exactly what they planned to do. I booked the flight and the hotel in the Florida Keys. Then I booked a second hotel room, under Arthur's name, in a business hotel just 20 minutes from the house. The day of my trip arrived. Sarah drove me to the airport, fussing over me like a mother hen. She hugged me at the curb. "Have a wonderful time, Dad. I love you." Her voice broke on the last two words. For a moment, a sliver of hope pierced my resolve. Maybe she would back out. Maybe her conscience would win. But then I saw Mark's car pull up behind her. He gave her a sharp, impatient look. The moment was gone. She pulled away, her eyes avoiding mine. "I love you too, sweetheart," I said. And in that moment, I did. I mourned the daughter I was losing even as I prepared to spring the trap on her. I went through security, waited at the gate, and then, once her car was long gone, I exited the airport and took a taxi to the hotel where Arthur was waiting. The hotel room was sterile and anonymous. A large monitor sat on the desk, showing 4 different angles of my study. The main shot was a wide view of the room, centered on the black iron safe. Arthur was there, a thermos of coffee on the table. He gave me a grim, supportive nod. "Ready, James?" I took a deep breath and sat down. Ready? We didn't have to wait long. It was just after 11 p.m. when the light in the study flicked on. The monitor showed Sarah and Mark creeping into the room. Sarah was wringing her hands, her face pale and drawn. She looked like a ghost haunting the scene of crime before it was even committed. "I don't feel right about this, Mark," she whispered, her voice barely audible through the microphone. "It feels so wrong." Mark was a coiled spring of greedy energy. He was wearing black gloves and carrying a heavy-duty crowbar. He paid her no mind. "Relax," he hissed, his eyes fixed on the safe. "It's for the best. He'll thank us one day." He knelt before the safe, examining the combination dial. "Did you ever see him open it?" "No," Sarah said, her voice trembling. "He was always so secretive about it," Mark chuckled, a nasty, arrogant sound. "Secretive, old fool. Probably forgot the combination years ago." He wedged the tip of the crowbar into the seam of the safe's door. He grunted, putting his weight into it. The old iron held firm. A line of sweat beaded on his forehead. "Come on, you piece of junk," he muttered, straining. He repositioned the crowbar and tried again. A loud metallic groan echoed in the silent room. Sarah flinched, covering her mouth with her hand. "Mark, be quiet. What if a neighbor hears?" "No one's going to hear anything," he grunted, his face turning red with exertion. He was no longer the smooth, charming businessman. He was a brute, a common thief, his true nature revealed under pressure. In the hotel room, Arthur and I watched in silence. I felt a strange sense of detachment, as if I were watching a movie. The man on the screen, sweating and cursing as he tried to pry open my family's history, was not my son-in-law. He was a stranger. The terrified woman cowering in the corner was not the little girl I had raised. She was his accomplice. My heart, which had been a battlefield of love and rage, was now cold and still. There was only the plan. On the screen, with a final tremendous heave, Mark put his entire body into the crowbar. There was a sickening shriek of tortured metal, and the safe door burst open, swinging wide and crashing against the wall. Mark stumbled back, breathing heavily, a triumphant, malicious smile spreading across his face. "Got it," he panted. "See? I told you." He knelt down and reached inside, his hands eager. He pulled out the velvet-lined box. Sarah crept closer, her fear momentarily replaced by a morbid curiosity. Mark opened the box. His triumphant smile faltered, replaced by a look of utter confusion. He pulled out the framed photograph of Helen. "What the hell is this?" he muttered. Sarah gasped when she saw the picture of her mother. Her face crumpled. "Oh my God," she whispered, tears instantly welling in her eyes. Mark tossed the photo aside carelessly. It hit the floor with a crack of glass. "It's just a picture," he snapped, his frustration mounting. He dug back into the box and pulled out the copy of the loan agreement. He scanned it, his eyes widening in recognition, then narrowing in rage. "That bastard," he snarled. With a cry of fury, he ripped the paper into tiny pieces, letting them flutter to the floor like confetti at a funeral. "That's not legally binding anyway," he spat. He didn't know it was a worthless copy. He thought he had destroyed the evidence of his death. Sarah was now openly sobbing, her body shaking. "Mark, stop. This is wrong. It's all wrong. Look what you did to Mom's picture." He ignored her completely, his face a mask of fury as he rummaged frantically in the empty box. "Where is it? Where's the money? The bonds? The gold?" His voice was rising, becoming shrill. He turned the box upside down and shook it violently. Nothing came out but the single, heavy silver dollar, which landed on the plush carpet with a soft thud. He stared at it as if it were a scorpion. He snatched it up, saw the tag, and read the words aloud, his voice a choked whisper of disbelief. "You wanted my life savings. This is all that's left for you. You earned it." For a long moment, there was absolute silence in the study, broken only by Sarah's heartbroken sobs. Mark stood frozen, the silver dollar in his palm, his face a canvas of confusion, rage, and dawning horror. It was the perfect moment. In the hotel room, I turned to Arthur. "It's time." I stood up, straightened my jacket, and we left. I had arranged for 2 uniformed police officers to meet us at the house. They were waiting discreetly in a patrol car down the street. We picked them up and walked calmly up the driveway. Arthur used my key to unlock the front door. We stepped inside. The house was silent. We walked down the hall to the study. The door was ajar. I pushed it open and stepped inside. "Looking for something, Mark?" I asked, my voice calm and even. They both spun around. The color drained from Mark's face. He looked as if he had seen a ghost. Sarah let out a small, terrified squeak and shrank back against the wall. Mark's eyes darted from me to Arthur, then to the 2 uniformed officers standing impassively in the doorway behind us. His bravado evaporated, replaced by raw, cornered animal panic. "James, what? You're supposed to be in Florida," he stammered, his mind clearly struggling to process the scene. "Plans change," I said coolly. I gestured around the room at the desecrated safe, the shattered picture frame, the confetti of the ripped-up loan agreement. "It seems I came back just in time for the party, though you appear to have come up a little short on the party favors." My eyes met Sarah's. The tears streamed down her face, but I felt nothing. The emotional dam inside me had been sealed with concrete. "Dad," she whispered, her voice pleading. "Dad, I'm so sorry. I didn't. He made me. You're a grown woman, Sarah." I cut her off, my voice like ice. "You made a choice. Your mother would be so ashamed." That single sentence struck her harder than any physical blow could have. A raw, animal cry of grief tore from her throat, and she collapsed onto the floor, sobbing hysterically. Mark, seeing his last line of defense crumble, found a final burst of arrogant fury. "You set me up," he screamed, pointing a trembling finger at me. "This is entrapment. You old fool, you set me up." "Did I?" I asked, taking a calm step forward. "Did I force you to lie to me for months? Did I put the crowbar in your hand? Did I make you desecrate a photograph of my late wife while trying to steal my life savings?" I pointed up at the corner of the ceiling. "Or did you do all of that on your own, in high-definition color with sound?" Arthur has the entire performance recorded. Mark's eyes followed my finger to the tiny, almost invisible lens of the camera. The last bit of color drained from his face. He looked pale, sickly. The smug, confident man was gone, replaced by a terrified, pathetic shell. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. One of the officers stepped forward. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to put your hands behind your back." The reality of the situation finally crashed down on Mark. His face contorted in a snarl of pure hatred. "You'll regret this, old man," he spat as the officer cuffed him. "I'll sue you for everything you have." Arthur stepped forward, a thin, cold smile on his face. "I don't think so, Mr. Collins. We have you on video confessing to knowledge of a loan, which you then destroyed what you believe to be the evidence of. We have you on video committing breaking and entering and destruction of property. My client, on the other hand, was in a hotel room miles away. You, sir, are what we in the legal profession refer to as well and truly screwed." They led him away, still sputtering threats and curses. I didn't watch him go. My gaze was fixed on my daughter, crumpled on the floor amidst the wreckage of her own making. The sense of victory I expected was absent. In its place was a vast, hollow emptiness. I had won, but I had lost my daughter. In the weeks that followed, the legal machine churned on. Mark, faced with irrefutable video evidence, took a plea deal. He got probation and a hefty fine for the property damage, but the felony conviction would follow him forever. His career as a big-shot talker was over. He was a convicted thief. Sarah, of course, was not charged. I refused to press charges against my own daughter. That was her punishment, to live with what she had done, with my quiet, unending disappointment. She moved out of the house and in with a friend. She called. She texted. She sent long, rambling letters filled with apologies and self-loathing. I read them, but I couldn't bring myself to respond. The trust was not just broken, it was ground into dust. How could I ever look at her again and not see her standing silently in the corner while her husband tried to rob me? How could I ever hear her say, "I love you," and not hear the echo of her weakness? I sold the house. It held too many ghosts. With the real proceeds from the sale of my business, a sum far greater than Mark had ever imagined, I established a charitable foundation in Helen's name. It provides scholarships and startup grants to young, hardworking women in business, women with the kind of grit and integrity Helen had, women like my daughter could have been. I travel now. I saw the pyramids at Giza and walked the Great Wall of China. I went fishing in the Florida Keys, for real this time. I am alone, but I am not lonely. I carry Helen's memory with me, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing I defended our legacy. I protected what we built. Sometimes, in a quiet moment, I think of Sarah. I have left her a small, separate trust, enough that she will never be destitute. It will be managed by Arthur and will become available to her on her 50th birthday. Perhaps by then, she will have built a life of her own, one founded on something more substantial than greed and expectation. Perhaps by then, she will have earned it. The wound is still there, a dull ache in my soul where a daughter used to be. But I am at peace. I learned a hard lesson, that sometimes the greatest act of love is to let go, and that kindness should never, ever be mistaken for weakness. The world is full of Marks, always looking for an easy mark. They will always underestimate the old man, sitting quietly in the corner. They will always be wrong.